Hello and welcome back to Bookish and welcome back to Tag Tuesday. This may be a week in which I do more than one tag, and I wanted to start off this week by doing the new tag created by Scot and Nell over Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, those fiendish devils from Australia who come up with all kinds of perplexing, thought-provoking questions to ask us in tags. Came up with a great new tag. I'll leave a link to theirs down below. I was tagged by Courtney Ferriter, who really jumped on this tag and turned it around really quick, and by Hannah from Hannah's Books. I'll leave a link to both theirs below. And I just finished watching, today is Monday when I'm filming, I just finished watching Marc Nash's version of this tag, and now my ideas, having watched all those, are completely confused. Now, normally when I do a tag, I write out some answers. I kind of like think about it for a long period of time and jot down some notes about stuff I want to talk about, but I'm just going to kind of wing this one to see if that doesn't give us a more honest reaction. Us give me, or mean that I give a more honest reaction. The first prompt is to tag some people. So I'm going to tag a few people. I'm going to tag Fraser Simons. I want to tag Britta Bowler. I don't know if you've been tagged or not yet. Britta, I want to tag, pretty sure Sean was tagged. I want to tag Rosie Cockshutt, and I want to tag Elle from Ellethinks. Sarah, I don't know if you're going to see this. Sarah from Hardcover Hearts. Jack the Rambling Raconteur would be a good one to do this. And Kazan from Always Doing. And let's see, who else do I want to tag that I don't think has been tagged yet? Let's go with Brandon from Brandon's Bookshelf. There we go. Those are the people that I'm going to tag. So now on to the questions. By the way, Scot and Nell always challenging form by making the tag question come first, which I kind of like. It gets that up front and people can see that right away. I always like knowing if I've been tagged when I'm watching a tag video while I'm watching the tag, because then I can think about my answers in relationship to the answers that people have given me. So I kind of like the tags being at the front. So question 2, how do you know you finished a good book? Is it a thinking or a feeling response? So I'm going to give a really goofy answer, and I'm going to say it's kind of a combination of both. Usually when I'm reading a really good book, there is a moment in that reading where I think have this kind of, to call it a transcendent experience is to make it far too mystical, but I have this moment where I go, wow, this book is doing something different, or wow, this book is doing something that I hadn't realized it was doing before, or wow, this is a different level, or wow, the idea or the concept behind this book is really unusual, or sometimes it's just, wow, this book really kind of moved me, or wow, this was really well executed, or wow, this was really well researched. But I had this kind of, I guess I'll call it a wow reaction. I had this kind of wow reaction, which I'm not sure if it's an intellectual or an emotional reaction. It can be both, either, and maybe, something in between or not at all like that. But I had this moment where all of a sudden, the pleasure I'm getting from reading, and most of the time when I read, I get pleasure from reading. But the pleasure I'm getting from reading is all of a sudden dialed up a notch when there's some kind of a realization I have that the book is doing something unusual, doing something new, doing something incredibly well, and it just really makes that reading experience a great reading experience for me, or a good reading experience. So depending on how much of that wow, or how much of that wow, this is doing something different, or this is doing something really well, that usually is where I know if I'm reading a good book, even before I'm finished. Prompt 3, when you begin to form your review rating, what is the first question you ask yourself? I don't know that I asked myself a question like that, other than, did this book, create that sensation in me? Did this book move me in that way, make me have that kind of aha, wow, epiphany, transcendent reading experience? And the more of that there was, the higher I would rate that book. Prompt 4, do you do star ratings? Why or why not? I don't do star ratings, and the reason is simple. I would not be consistent, and this Scot and Nell actually brought this up in theirs. I have no idea how I would deal with the fact that, rating books that are just, really kind of fun to read versus books which I think have, maybe a little bit more intellectual heft to them. How would I rate those evenly or fairly? That just doesn't seem like something I could do. So I don't have a star rating system, and consistency and an inability to kind of bridge that gap between the different types of books would be the reason why. Let's see. So then in part B of that question is, if you answered no, what language did you use to convey the quality of a book in your reviews? So I think generally speaking what I say is great. So great, I guess, would be the equivalent of a 5-star book. Good would be the equivalent of a 4-star book. And okay would be the equivalent of a 3-star book. You know, I'm one of those people who gives books really a lot of the benefit of the doubt, and it has to be really pretty bad to be below probably that okay rating. One of the things that can make it that way is just, you know, really bad writing, really bad construction. That could do it. But for the most part, probably I'm just going to be in that okay, good to great level. Prompt 5, do you believe every book has its perfect reader? And then does this contradict the idea that a book can be bad? I think every book has, I think perfect is the wrong word, and maybe I'm just splitting hairs here. I think every book has its ideal reader. I think that, for instance, if I write an academic book, then my ideal reader is somebody who is going to that book for academic reasons. They're going to it to learn. That may mean that for them the book works and is good, whereas if it was, you know, somebody who wasn't reading for an academic purpose, they might find the book to be tiresome and boring, and, you know, the language of it to be unappealing. The same thing can be true, I think, with a book whose just subject is something that appeals to you. I read a book a couple of months ago, which I just thought was just a terrible book. It was badly written. It was badly organized. The title was not accurate to what the book was actually about. And, you know, I kind of, you know, trashed that book in lots of ways. But even when I was doing that, you know, I realized that because of the subject matter of that book, there were some people who were just going to like it because of what it talked about. It was kind of this gossipy Hollywood, you know, golden age of Hollywood book. And I can see where somebody would pick that book up and read it and like it, even though I thought it was bad. Did I answer that question? So I don't think it contradicts the idea that a book can be bad. I think it kind of contextualizes what makes a bad book to the reader and the purpose and the reason why somebody is reading. Prompt 6: what book that you hated have you recommended? I don't think I've recommended a book that I've hated. I'm trying to think if that would be true. Yeah, first, I don't think I hate that many books, and B, I probably wouldn't recommend it if I did. But I can see me recommending a book that I didn't like, that didn't work for me. And I'll give you an example of that. I read Oscar and Lucinda. A buddy read this with Kim from Middle of the Book March this year, and this is a book that is Jason from Old Blues Chapter and Verse, one of his favorite, if not his favorite book. And I read it, and I really did not like it. I could see what it was doing, and I appreciated some of the facts of it, but it's just not a book that was for me. But I could see recommending this book to someone who maybe, you know, struck me as being more the kind of reader and along the lines of what I believe Jason to be as a reader, and someone who was different than me, somebody who kind of liked this kind of, or seemed to like this kind of book. I could see me recommending it even though I didn't necessarily like it, and it really didn't work for me. Let's see. Prompt 7: what makes a book good, bad, or great by your evaluation? So again, it goes back to that kind of like, what was my response? Did I have that aha, wow, epiphany, transcendent moment while reading it, and how strong was that? So to give you some examples, I brought some examples of books out here. The books kind of show the difference between, I think, good and great. Yeah, I'm not going to really do bad because, like I said, I don't know that I do a lot of bad books. So I brought 2 books that I thought were good that I read really recently. One would be A Ghost in the Throat by Darren Negriffa, and the other would be The Sentence by Louise Erdrich. I thought both of these books were good. Maybe even really good, and that I could see what the authors were doing. There was something in them. There were moments in there where I was like, wow, that's really great, or that's really far more involved than I thought it would be, or that's really surprising, or maybe that passage is really beautiful, maybe that idea is really beautiful, and I thought these were good books to very good books. Compare that then to great, and there you see for me the difference isn't that probably that great, but Newpoming, one of my books of the year, no doubt, which I found kind of ironic since this is a tag created by Scot and Nell, and Scott hated this book, which it was his fault for listening to it as an audiobook. But this book I just thought was great because it was just so new and revelatory and so interestingly constructed and so completely and I think I heard Fraser say this, so completely unconcerned with traditional Western ideas of novels and storytelling, and it just worked for me so kind of brilliantly that it was just like, wow, that's great. And every moment I was reading it, I was enjoying it, and I immediately went back and reread it. I had a similar experience with Tara June Winch's novel The Yield, maybe not quite so strong, but there was a moment where I realized how she had constructed this novel around one of her characters' collection or creation of a dictionary of indigenous people's language, and how those two things meshed together. And it was just, I was like, that's just brilliant, and that was just really, really good. And on top of that, there's a scene at a celebration of the main character's grandfather's life, which I just found to be really moving. And then also At Night All Blood is Black by David Diop. This book there was a point at which I realized this book was working on so many different levels, and there was so much stuff going on in such a relatively short book that I was just completely, staggered when I realized and started thinking of all the levels and all the references. It just really was kind of stunning to think that all of that had been packed into a relatively short book. So, to me, and you could probably tell the difference in the way in which I talked about the books just now, where that difference between good and great lies. But in terms of bad, if a book's bad, I'm just going to tell you it was bad. Oh, the writing was bad. The organization didn't make sense. The author kind of cut corners by doing this at the end, or this didn't make sense. That would probably be kind of how I would put that. And those are things, by the way, that would make a book bad for me. Let's see, prompt 8. When evaluating the quality of a book, do you have a specific criteria or aspects of the book, such as character development, you consider? Does this change if you're writing an in-depth review versus thinking about the book for enjoyment? So I won't belabor the point about the criteria I use to evaluate a book in terms, again, of that kind of aha, wow moment, and that the strength of that then is kind of what I hope comes through in my reviews when I do them here on BookTube. Let me make sure I'm getting the question right here. So I don't know if there are specific aspects of the book that you could identify, like the characters were good, the plot was good, the setting was good. I'll probably say something about whether or not the writing was good when evaluating books here on BookTube. But what I hope to convey is that thing, without giving it all away, but that thing about the book that I found to be so special, so moving, so kind of grabbed me, so eye-opening. That's the thing I want to convey in the reviews. Not sure I'm always capable of doing that. And I'll point out that is an inherently subjective viewpoint on the book. And I want to point that out because, there's no way for this not to sound pretentious, but since I did recently start trying my hand at writing book reviews, formal, somewhat in-depth book reviews, I will tell you that when you do that, for me, there's a difference between the way I review a book here on BookTube, where I'm trying to communicate kind of that emotional or that kind of intellectual response I had to the book, which is, I do think, is somewhat subjective, to a more objective way of looking at a book if I was going to write a formal review. if I was going to write a formal review, I would be a lot more interested in the way in which the book was structured and how it fit together and how it worked. I would pay a lot more attention to really good writing or really bad writing. And I will tell you, there are objective standards that we all apply when reading a book. You know, for instance, if you're reading a book that's supposed to make sense and it doesn't make sense because it doesn't, that is an objective evaluation. This book doesn't make sense. You know, it's been going along making perfectly good sense, operating within the confines of the real world, and then all of a sudden near the end of the book something happens that doesn't make sense and isn't explained. Well, that is objectively something you can evaluate about the book. You can objectively evaluate writing. You can say, you know, this writing is bad. I'll give you an example. I was reading a book recently, and one of the things that I don't like in fiction, and I mentioned this when I was doing a review and talking to the group, was reading Torrey Peters' Detransition Baby this year. What I don't like in a book is when there is a popular cultural reference that is just dropped into the book, and the idea is, and the author doesn't go any further in explaining. They just use this cultural reference point to say, you know, okay, everybody's going to know what this is, and therefore I don't actually have to explain it. To me, that feels a little lazy on the part of the author, and I just think it really hurts the lasting importance of that book, because there's going to come a time during which nobody's going to get that reference. I'll give you an example. In The Great Gatsby, early on, when Nick meets Tom Buchanan mentions a book called The Rise of the Mongrel Race, or something like this, by this fellow named Godard. That is a specific cultural reference to the 1920s, to the work of eugenicists, fake scientists, racist writers, who gained a lot of popularity in the 20s. And, you know, without that kind of cultural reference, without knowing that, that line just seems like a throwaway, and it can be one of those things in The Great Gatsby, which I think is irritating. To go off on a tangent about The Great Gatsby here, I really like The Great Gatsby as a novel. I think it's a great novel, but I also think that it almost never works well on film because the dialogue is so specific. Fitzgerald wrote the dialogue as you would have had young people speaking and using slang in the 1920s, and to be honest with you, a lot of that stuff doesn't make any sense anymore. And so if you stick with Fitzgerald dialogue when you make the movie, you have this kind of anachronistic type of language that people are speaking, which I'm not sure always works well. Wow, I went off on a tangent about that. Did I even finish answering that question? Oh yeah, so if I was writing the review, I would want to have much more. I would find many more objective things to say about the book. So, you know, I do think that book critics can write objective reviews of books. That doesn't mean they're all going to agree. I did a whole video about this before, where I think every critic or writer has their own kind of, every critic or reviewer has their own rubric, and they apply that rubric over and over again, then they're being objective. I won't go back into that all over again, but that's kind of what I think there. So yes, I would be much more careful and try to be much more objective in a written review. Prompt 9, do you consider star ratings or average ratings when choosing a book to read and add your TBR? No. 10, who on BookTube does reliable and interesting reviews of books that you know you can use to decide if a book is for you or not, and what makes the review so good? So I'm going to actually list some people, and if I don't list you, that doesn't mean you aren't a great reviewer. It just means right now on the fly I didn't think of you. So Britta Bowler, I like hearing her opinion about books. I don't always agree. We have differences in our reading tastes, but I can trust her reviews. Particularly, I think I trust her positive reviews of books, even though I love watching her tops and flops, and particularly love the flops. But her positive reviews have always worked well for me. The same is true for Sarah at Hardcover Hearts. Her positive reviews of books almost always work for me. The person who irritates me the most with their reviews is Marc Nash, because when he reviews a book and likes it, I almost automatically want that book. Courtney Ferriter and I, as she pointed out, we have very similar reading tastes, other than the fact that she loves Thomas Hardy, which is, you know, like Scott. I don't understand that. He's a miserable person, and his books are all about unhappy people, as far as I can remember. Also, I would mention here, oh wow, my mind just went blank. Also, I would mention here Steve Donahue. In his video, Mark said that he watches a lot of Eric Carl Anderson's videos, his haul videos, to see what books Eric Carl Anderson has has bought, and even before he reads them, sometimes Marc gets an idea of a book he might want to read. The same thing happens to me with Steve Donahue, and I've made this point in my last video. Steve and I don't agree about very much, and I don't mean this to be negative at all. But when Steve comes out and is really negative about a book, I almost automatically think that might be a book I like, and it's not because I'm just trying to be mean about Steve. It's because I know his reading taste and mine are oftentimes really opposite. So if he really doesn't like a book and he has all these great reasons why he doesn't like it, oftentimes those are things I like about books. To give you an example of how this works, I mentioned in my TBR video for this month that I'm planning on reading Normal People by Sally Rooney, in part because Steve just absolutely dislikes the work of Sally Rooney so much. At some point I thought to myself, maybe I should try reading Sally Rooney just to see if I agree with Steve about this, or if this is one of those places where we disagree. Daniel at Guilty Feet, also a reviewer I listen to. Who else is there? Oh, I've left so many people out. I'm sorry I left everybody else out. I know I should. Oh, Sean the Book Maniac. Oftentimes I get great ideas for book reviews from him. Oh, did I mention Hannah from Hannah's Books? Also really great ideas. Kim from Middle of Bookmark. Anyway, and then even Scot and Nell, Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, have recommended their books I want to read because they have recommended them and rated them highly. And I have a feeling I will like those books. So again, if I didn't mention you, it doesn't mean I don't think you're a great reviewer. It just means here on the fly, I thought of the names I could think of. Let's see. Then prompt 11. Does those booktubers use different language than you to evaluate, review the overall quality of the book? Yes. Some use star ratings, some don't. Some are more plot-driven readers. Oh, Kazan from Always Doing is another reviewer. Some are more plot-driven readers. Some are more character-driven readers. Some specialize in areas I don't. Some, put an emphasis on things that I don't always emphasize without thinking them. Marc Nash always reads books that are interestingly constructed or written, and they talk about them differently. But all of them at some point, I think, when I'm watching a review and somebody is reviewing the book and I think I want to read that because of what they said, it's not necessarily the language they used, but it's the feeling they communicated about how much they liked that book. About how that book affected them as a reader. That's what makes me want to read that book. Okay, I think that's it. Yes, there we go. That's it. Thanks to Scot and Nell for creating such a great tag. Thank you to Hannah and Courtney Ferriter for tagging me to do this. Look forward to your comments in the comment section below. And as always, thank you for watching.